Hey there, and welcome to our Champion Church YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, maybe you found it just scrolling through, or maybe you are a subscriber here, then you already know this. And if not, let me introduce you to it. We are a church that is passionate about you championing every season of your life. Now, if you notice, I'm not standing in a typical church setting. I'm standing in a home. That's because we believe to champion every season, you have to champion what goes on here in your house. Today, we get the opportunity to sit with a friend of mine, my small group leader, someone I've looked up to, Mr. Jake Hamilton, right here in the home, and talk about what goes on here. Talk about how to lead in the home. Talk about how to train up a child in the way they should go. How do you deal with doubt? How do you hear from God? We love church, and we're passionate about the gatherings of that, but we truly believe what happens here matters most. If this is your first time ever hearing Jake, just to kind of give you a 30,000 foot view of who he is, first and foremost, he is a husband and a father. He's also a church planner in his years gone by, in the past years, if you will. He's a passionate worship leader. That's where I think a lot of us got introduced to him first. He has a heart, though, for home and for families and for men. And trust me, you're going to hear that in this. And while you're listening, you're also going to notice that we had some technical difficulties. Honestly, I was crushed when we first heard it back because our audio was all messed up. And there's a part of me that just wanted to scrap all of it, but we felt like we should still put this out because you're just going to kind of hear the raw audio of the room. Now, one of the best ways to listen to this, honestly, is just turn on the closed captioning if you need to, or just turn it up. But we believe what Jake has to say on these matters of leading in the home, training up a child, doubt, and hearing from God, it really can help us champion every season. So, without further ado, let's jump in to today. So if you have no idea who he is, look him up. Mr. Jake Hamilton is with us today. What a blessing to have him with Champion. And here's what we're doing. Jake, like I said, has a great heart, huge heart for families and for men. And as we champion every season, you have to champion in the home. So we wanted to do a few of these different ones, and I just felt like you were the perfect one to start with. And we're just going to jump right into it. So how would you describe to someone, how do they lead at home? Not just a church service 1 hour a week. How do you really, truly lead at home?
Leading at home has so much to do with, number one, like the greatest thing a mom and a dad can offer their children is a healthy marriage. So if you think being a good parent is the priority, you're going to miss the greatest thing you could offer a child. And in fact, you can really screw up in parenting a ton, and you can get away with it if a husband loves their wife well and a wife loves their husband well, because that is the model they'll take, you know? So, and we always work from the overflow. So if we have a good relationship there, it's naturally going to overflow to your children. And so, but then when we get to the marriage level, we have to get to the fact that, is your life fully integrated? So if I'm not going to be able to lead my home well if I don't even like myself. Come on. And so shame and guilt actually end up defining how we lead. So we end up disciplining our spouse for our own shame. So when they get too close, we have to then hold them back. When our kids hit a spot that triggers us, we go hard on them because we can't really go hard on ourselves. And so I think leading your home has a lot to do with, do I really enjoy being with me? Do I have a fully integrated whole life? You know, 1 Thessalonians 5, I'm whole body, mind, and spirit. Am I leading in a way that actually I enjoy me in this space? You know, if you feel like a really crappy dad and a really crappy husband, a really crappy wife, a really crappy mom, you're not going to lead your home because you already feel like you're anything you try is coming from deficit. So and it's so hard because we want to start with, give me the parenting tips. Give me the parenting tips. Give me the 5 steps to a better marriage. I want to be healthier in this way. And it's like, well, it actually has to start with the fact that, do you own your stuff? Do I own my own story? Or am I still disconnected from my life and my experience? And I use God to candy coat it. And then from there, I try to demand leadership and authority in my house instead of earning it through their hearts, which is way longer term, right? Like, it's way easy to be like, right, demand authority and leadership. And most of us, that's what we've experienced.
Right.
So to get the tender, kind-hearted, humble leader, servant leader in a home that really owns who they are first, then they can help others in their home own who they are.
Right. Let me ask you practically, because number one, that's good enough. Like we could.
Let's go get some lunch. That was great.
All right. So how do you? I'm going to speak a lot from a man perspective today. But how do you own that story of yourself? And I know we talk about this a lot in our group. But how do you, from a 30,000-foot view,
absolutely,
to a mom that's watching, a single mom that's watching, or a single dad, or whoever it might be, just a couple who's like, hey, we kind of. How do you own that?
Absolutely, it's one word, and it's called wholeheartedness. Did I eat breakfast this morning wholeheartedly? Like, am I fully engaged? Is really another way to say it. Am I being intentional? Is another way to say it. What we're talking about is if we want to talk about integration of your entire story and talk about the complexities of let's deal with your 8-year-old, let's deal with all the stuff you've been through, your trauma.
Right.
We can get to all that. The reality, the practical, everyday, everyone watching or hearing this can do is, am I being wholehearted in the moment I'm in right now? What I mean by that is, am I thinking about 30,000 other things? Am I on my phone while I'm eating breakfast, while I'm trying to read this and take care of my family? No wonder everybody in the house feels disconnected and nobody feels like they get your full self, because we're not being wholehearted. We're not being present in the moment. I like the word wholeheartedness. Dan Allender uses it, so I love it. But I would add the word, are we fiercely wholehearted in our present moment? So am I fully given to this moment? When I'm dealing with my kids, are they an annoyance to me? If I'm being honest, genuinely, I think we need to be honest. Because if you don't, you get shame and guilt. But if I can say out loud, I am not giving you my best right now. Right. I can't actually focus. Way better, to be honest, I'm not wholehearted in this moment. I'm not giving you my whole heart. To your spouse, instead of making them a project or trying to get through a moment, the best way to integrate our story is to accept where our story led us today. Which means, am I sitting in this moment with you fully present? Or do I have 15 things going on in my head and my heart? And if I can be fully present here, then the best part of this is when I can't be, the question then becomes, why? Very simple. Right. Am I present with my child? Yeah. No. Why? What is the distraction that is a priority over my own child?
And we talk about this a lot.
Right.
And that's different, especially if you're the provider in the home. Right. Not an excuse.
No, absolutely.
But it's a reality. But at the same time, you are choosing one or the other.
Well, and it's about boundaries, right? Because if I let my work, so if I tell my wife I'm going to be off at 5, I tell men this all the time, so this is it, which is a sucky thing to tell them. But it's I'm like, if you tell your wife you're done with work at 5 and you're still doing work at 5:15, you're a liar. So now you're telling your wife, I'm going to lie to you. And we have 1,000 reasons we can justify those 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
Right? 1,000 reasons.
Right.
But the truth is, the reason I can't engage is because I'm so fearful of money, because fear is the root system of all of these disconnections. Fear and trauma is the root system. So I'm like, in the name of providing, you don't get my whole heart. So now providing is more important than your child getting your whole heart. Or whatever it is in our lives, just whatever that is. And then we talk a lot about this, but the language of following the thread. Right. So if I'm sitting with you and I'm trying to be wholehearted, trying to be really engaged, wholehearted with you, and I'm not. Number one, I can be honest about that. I'm really sorry. I'm actually not giving you my whole heart right now, and I want to. Just saying that will bring you right back into the space, by the way, because humility always brings the presence of God, right? So whenever we humble ourselves, He always shows up. So we humble ourselves in that moment. He shows up. We feel connected, but now I can explore what was I determining in that moment is more important than you. And if I do that, then I go, let's say it's work, whatever, Then I go, oh, crap. Or you know what? No, let's make it really personal. My family's traveling today. if I go, I'm really distracted by my family. It sounds like a good thing. But it's actually rooted in probably some fear. Are they not going to be okay? Can I not protect them? What's happening? Then all of a sudden, I'm controlling. If I follow those things back, I can find my insecurities. I can find my trauma. I can find my disconnection to the moment. And then I can do the work of engaging with it and all the other stuff from it. But real practically, am I wholeheartedly sitting and enjoying the I said breakfast originally. Am I enjoying the fact that I can sit and have a bowl of cereal and like be fully engaged with the nourishment and provision that this is bringing to my body? Or am I shoving it into my face, trying to get to the next thing?
Right.
Which means I'm doing nothing with wholeheartedness.
Man, that's so good. And I know you love the word wholehearted. For me, it's that intentional.
Right, that's exactly what it is.
Am I being intentional? And the following the thread of, hey, what are these things that are off? Because and correct me if I'm wrong in this, I feel like it's then we can bring those things to Jesus and be like, why do I feel this? And not that he should, right. I don't want to say not that he doesn't take it away, because that could be construed, right. But it's then he can deal with it. Then you're inviting him into the situation.
Right, but I think what's more difficult is bringing it to the person you're sitting with.
Oh, being honest with him.
Right.
I love that.
See, because the point is, we've now candy-coated so much of Jesus' language that we end up going, I don't have to bring it to you. I'll just go bring it to the Lord.
Right, and then have it, because isn't that, I would say it's almost like pride.
1,000%.
Because instead of just admitting to you,
right,
hey, I'm putting something else before you right now,
right,
and I hate it, that's so good. Because I can be like, oh, God, help me with this. But if I don't bring it to my wife, my kids, my friends, whoever, that's so good.
Right, because in that humility, he invades. That's where he actually does the work, which is why most of our prayers are just saying it out loud. Like, right? Like, we're trying to have really great religious language, but really most of it is just saying out loud the thing that I'm the deepest, probably most difficult thing I'm actually experiencing, and just saying it out loud allows it to be released, and I can be fully focused with my whole heart.
Right.
You know?
That's so good. All right, so and maybe we hit on this, maybe there's more. The next thing is, what do we need in our homes that we don't realize we need? And that might be the wholeheartedness, because that's missing. I don't know, I'm not judging anybody that's with us watching, but I don't know anybody who's doing that super well.
No.
And I'm not doing that super well. When you're talking, I was like, crap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I feel the same way, because I'm going like, that's what's so hard is I think maybe we can add to it in that question by going, get rid of all your finish lines. Like, get rid of all your markers for success so that you can actually just be in the journey for the next 60 years and know that the journey is actually good enough. If you need a finish line or some sense of accomplishment in order to feel successful, you're probably just going to feel like a failure the rest of your life and live in disappointment. Because there's no arrival in your marriage or in parenting. I mean, literally, we talk about this a ton with marriages, but it's like, marriage is a covenant, but each season of your marriage requires a new contract. It requires a new contract. So you have a kid, new contract, new job, new contract, new house, new contract, new whatever. You just re-up the contract. Like, what is this season bringing? And how do we do this well? And it's the same with kids. It's like, what they needed it for, they don't need it at 16.
Right,
so it's you're redoing contracts constantly in the house. And there's a sense of, when I get rid of the finish lines, like, now I'm a good, what person is walking around going, and I am the greatest parent on earth? I really arrived in parenting. I feel like I really got this on lock. You know what I mean? Anybody who says that clearly doesn't have teenagers yet, and it's totally fine. It's like,
so people know you have 3 teenagers. My daughter just turned 18.
Right, my daughter turned 18, and my son will turn 16 real soon, this next week. And then I have a 13-year-old going to be a 14-year-old. So in June. So yeah, we're like in the throes of teenage life.
So, and that's what you're not speaking from just like, I've got it all together or any of that. And just if anybody, this is your first time ever meeting Jake, he's one of the most humble people I know. Truly, I mean that. I had someone ask me just yesterday riding the work truck. They said, "Oh, I heard we're on film with Jake. Like, how is he?" I said, "He's a real person. Like, he's one of the coolest." Because you can see you on the. I joked about the Holy Ghost documentary stuff, but we can see you doing that. We can see you in the stadiums with Jesus Culture back in the early 2010s. We can see all of that stuff that you're doing. We see the insane Instagram stuff that you do, how cool that is. But you are a real guy that is married, that's passionate about your marriage. And I'm saying this outside looking in. Passionate about, I hear your vulnerability in our small group, in our Man Talk Mondays. Like I hear that kind of stuff, but you have a heart to really do this stuff at home well.
If I'm not doing it at home well, then it doesn't lead me to have real authority in a space to bring it up. And that's what most people end up missing, ever saying anything, because they think they have to arrive before they're able to do. And that's just like, that's so pointless. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a fruitless effort. And it's hard because we build systems around famous Christians, or whoever is the best Christian gets paid the most.
That's
and
true.
it's like, if you're a better Christian than me, then you get to be the guy on stage.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's awful.
Let me just help anybody watching this. I am not the best Christian of this church or anything. I can tell you that right now. I can promise you. I just get the crazy opportunity to be a part of this.
Right, and that's what's so dope about leading something like this, is you're like, at the end of the day, my friend used to say this all the time, we're just one beggar telling another beggar where he got his bread. And I'm like, I love that.
You said that at Fight Weekend. I love that. And that's offensive to some people. It was, remember at Fight, it's offensive. Like, people just honest, like, that offends me.
Right.
But it's so true. I don't want to just read what you're saying, but I love that. Because you haven't arrived, and everybody is in this journey. So let me ask you this, kind of just teeing off of that.
Yeah.
What do we say to the person who says they've screwed up too much? They've blown it at home.
You're right. Okay. Yes, you did. Like number one, glad you see it.
So
to be honest with you, I'd rather have a dude who walks up to me and goes, "Dude, I have blown it. Totally trashed everything. Tanked my marriage. Sucked with my kids." I go, "Dude, step one, grieve."
Come on. I was about to say, give me practical stuff.
Grieve is if you're not going to be moved to tears by it, you're telling on yourself you're not vulnerable yet. And if you're just going to tell on yourself, I actually don't need the information, because you're trying to get me to approve of your bad behavior by telling on yourself. Vulnerability, you don't have control of the story anymore. So you're telling me probably because you don't want to tell your wife. And that's where it starts to fall apart. Is you have to be moved to tears. Are you grieved? And we're literally in the Sermon on the Mount now, right? If you're not going to mourn, no wonder you're not comforted. No, you're like, that's so good. And that's why we find false comforts. So we'll default to false comforts because we haven't really truly met the comforter, because the only way to get to the comforter is mourn and grief. And so that ends up becoming the way we do the first step. Is like, if you come to me and go, I can't do this, I messed up too much. I go, yes, you have. And then go, but does it move your heart yet? Because if it hasn't moved your heart, and it's just moved your mouth, then it's not going to do anything yet. But until it breaks your heart, there won't be any forward momentum.
So one step, not that I'm trying to
totally
formulate this.
No.
We're grieving it, or I've screwed up too much, or I feel like, hey, I'm so far gone. Okay, grief. Where does, I know Holy Spirit will lead people in different journeys.
Right.
What would you say practically? How do you start handling your home at that point?
You start having conversations that matter. Like, it's because grief, comfort, then humility, right?
Right.
So I recognize I messed up. I'm dealing with a lot of guys right now who's like, they started Man Talk Mondays and they're like, oh crap, I've got some stuff I can't hide it anymore.
Right.
Because now if I want to go any further, I have to tell my wife. I have to have a conversation, and some wives need to have a conversation with their husband. We need to have conversations about how our brokenness, how our trauma has led, our historic trauma has led to continued brokenness, and how that has now caused me to lean into grief. I felt comfort from God, but now I have to humble myself before men. And pay the consequences of that.
And I don't, again, correct me.
No,
I look up to Jake, so I say that a lot. It's not, because we say this a lot in Man Talk, it's not just pornography or something like, because I think in the early 2000s, 2010s, something like that, when the internet, that became the big thing. Well, admit that you have lust. Right. Or admit, it could be an insecurity. Or I hate this word, but it could be a trigger.
Absolutely.
It could be an addiction that has nothing to do with a substance or a whatever.
Well, what's the number one addiction that most men have that nobody talks about?
I would say, I'm going to guess work.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, that's
right, because I can justify that.
Because you're making money.
Dude.
And you feel...
You feel a set... And the hard part is, we say it's about provision, but it's not. It's about ego. Right. It's about fulfilling
that's
my...
Right.
That's the hard part. Right. But when I hit it, and I realize I'm performing, because I don't know how to get love if I'm not performing well or providing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then the grief can settle in, right? Because then when the grief settles in, I can feel comfort from God that I'm good enough where I am.
Oh, man. And that's the hard part. But it's so, like, you knew me in the stage of I had to perform to feel like I was loved by God.
Right.
A lot of our church team knew me in that state.
Oh, I feel it. I'm there most of the time, having to go to war against it.
of where I would be. I mean, the seasons I went through, the suicidal ideations to the burnout, was because that was my idol. And mine was ministry. I know 95% of people watching this aren't going to. That ministry side isn't there, but it's the work side. And I just hate, not that pornography is okay, or anger, or substance abuse is okay. I'm not saying any of addiction to any of that is okay.
No, of course
but
not.
There's so much stuff that you'd have to say, hey, I'm broken in this way, and we have to have this conversation.
Because the hard part is the church has systematically moralized our faith to such a degree that the only confirmation of how good we are before God is our moralistic standard. So instead of embracing mystery and tension and suffering and hardship, really what we've done is found 1,000 coping mechanisms and found the ones that are the least offensive to religious cultures.
Right.
And then we just adopted those. So even going on 1,000 missions trips is still actually just the same thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's giving tons of your money to the church or going every Sunday, being a part of every single thing. Right. If you're a part of 1,000 church events, but you're not engaging with your family, do you think God's like, wow, you're amazing?
Come on, thank you.
Like, oh, I'm so glad you showed up on... Listen, if you're fighting on Sunday morning, you don't have to... Why do we have to rush out of the door to church? To then fake like we're getting along, to then add guilt and shame to the trauma that just took place in our home.
Right.
You know how much better it would be to be like, clearly something's off. Let's all sit at the table and we're going to just sort this out. Right. And I love that, but we don't ever do it. In fact, I can publicly say I love Yellowstone to probably an unhealthy degree. But there's this episode where they're like, these two guys aren't getting along, and they just put them in the pen, and they said, we're going to get the fight out of you. And they just beat the tar out of each other until they both couldn't move. One has a broken hand, and they're just laying there.
Right.
And finally, the other one helps the other one up, and they're like, we're good. And I'm like, dude, that is family. Right. Like, why have a fight, ignore we just had it, and then go do something religious that essentially is anesthetizing us to the reality that we just had trauma that has real root systems for some reason. It's actually more honoring to God to sit down on the couch, look your spouse in the eyes, and go, what just happened? Yeah. Than it is to be like, church is in 5 minutes, get in the car.
Right. And I would think too, and we say this, especially we said this after the fight weekend, you can't just go home and be like, this is what we're doing. It's going to take some, right? Am I saying that right? It's going to take some pulling of the layers. Like,
well, yeah, I think like the difference is you're not going to do this well. I think the expectation that you're going to sit on the couch and then have all the language to then sort through your trauma is like...
You did this and it hurt me.
What I want to tell you is when you said this, it hurt me at a deep level because when I was 6, I heard my mom say this and that... We're not, no.
Now let's go get some Taco Bell and just and watch Yellowstone.
Yeah, exactly. We're good. It really is just, it's listening to the other person. One of the best, super practical is the tool, the comfort cycle in the book, How We Love. So I mentioned that a ton, probably in everything we do. That engagement of active listening, understanding how you hear someone, using it as a really stupid tool at first, and then when you get comfortable with it, you end up utilizing it differently. But to be able to sit in your trauma is actually one of the best things. Like, even if you have no language, just to say we're not going to ignore that this just happened. We're going to honor our dysfunction.
Right.
And in that honoring of this hard place, we're not going to know what to do. We're just going to sit in it.
Right.
Nobody wants to do that.
No, God, no.
Right. But it's actually the most holy thing you can do in your house. Because I'm not going to bypass your trauma for my, comfort.
Right.
Like, I don't need you to be here's the big statement. I don't need you to be okay so that I'm okay. Which is just codependence.
Right.
So what I want to do is just sit in the fact that that sucked. We don't need to talk.
Right.
If there's something that needs to be said, we can say it. But if not, let's just give this about 15 minutes.
Let me ask you this: is there safe barriers you feel like you need to put up, where someone who is trying to do this, and I'm kind of setting up this kind of false scenario, but someone's trying to do this, and there's already so much under the bridge between them, it could cause another trigger of, well, if we don't want to talk about it, or we don't want to do it, then you're wanting to leave me, or you're wanting to do this.
Right.
Like, do you set up barriers, or do you just kind of be like, hey, my heart is for you 1,000%?
Well, it's the tools, right? So that's why I would say get a hold of a tool like the Comfort Cycle from How We Love, book by Milan and Kay Yerkovich.
We'll tackle
that Comfort Cycle. Look it up. They have tons of YouTube videos. You can watch it play out, the whole deal. That we need practical tools to go, how do I engage with this? Because really, it's dumb language that seems dumb. I can see that I've hurt you. Can you tell me direct? And I put it all on men. You know how I do.
Right,
So listen, men, your standard, if you're going to claim to be a Christian husband, if you're not claiming that, you do whatever the hell you want. I'm cool with that. And I think some of us just need to admit, I'm not trying to be that.
Right.
Dude, if you can't, better to be honest so that the standard isn't set up for your failure.
Then it could even hurt people around you.
Right.
And hurt them in the way that, well, that's what I saw done, and he's a Christian or whatever, and that's how he treats. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's exactly right. You're 100% right. And it's us being able to sit in that and go, men, you have to go first.
Right.
Like your job is honestly, your job is honestly to go first every time. So you have to learn to lead the dance of your house. So when it comes to fights or trauma, you're going to have to hold space. There's a reason there's a joke that goes around that the woman's always right. Now, we made it a joke.
Right.
It's actually not a joke. It actually isn't either or. It's not the woman's always right and the man just needs to be totally shut down and just accept that. It's really, the woman gets the privilege in the marriage household of God,
right,
to display her brokenness and have it cared for before the husband's need is cared for. And so the husband's job is to embody their pain and have it heard and seen in a way that no other man on planet Earth will ever have the privilege and honor of doing for them. So when the man leads that space, the woman then feels safe, and then she can lead into hers. So the man has to lead that time on the couch. That's where it goes.
Gotcha.
They have to go, I see that you're hurt. Or I see that what I'm saying doesn't make sense. Can you explain that to me? They explain. This is the Comfort Cycle, short version. They explain it. You go, I hear what you're saying. What emotion comes with that? Mm-hmm. This emotion. Do you remember, what's the youngest time in your life you remember feeling that emotion? Wow, okay, yeah, I remember feeling this way when I was blah, blah. Wow, that must have been very difficult for you. I'm sorry that I was a reminder of that. Is there anything I can do in the future to help you not feel that way?
Right. And then, even unpacking that, you can see the vulnerability that will unpack through that. And then naturally. That creates a closeness.
Right. And men, you may go several years, like, without getting sort of your part of this actually held yet. That's why we need groups of men.
Right.
Because we're actually supposed to do most of our work with men so that we can be in that place in the home. And instead what we do is just Bible studies, which is like, to me, so, I get a value system for it, but honestly it's mostly pointless because at the end of the day I can repeat some verses and know a few whatever, but we have no practical tools to lead our home.
Like that, literally, right? I mean, what we've been saying for the last, 20, 30 minutes
Right.
or whatever.
And the thing that you brought up, which is really good, is there's most of the marriages we're talking about probably already have a history of trauma. So you ever go overdraft in your bank account?
Never.
Yeah. What do they charge you?
Like $35, $37, whatever.
Right. For how much do you have to spend for them to give you that $35 hit?
None.
30 cents.
Oh,
20
oh,
cents.
you're right.
It could be anything.
It could be the old Apple downloads of 99 cents.
Right.
It costs you.
Okay, so check this out. Now, marriage correlation. If your marriage is already in deficit and you went over just 2 cents,
Oh, that's good.
you're going to charge $35. And
That's
you're like, why the hell
Right.
is that price so high? Every husband,
Right.
I've only gone over 2 cents.
Right.
Why are you charging me $35?
I didn't do this one little thing, and then that's so good. Now, I know where you were going to go a second ago, and when I cut you off, I was like, I didn't. When men say, well, that's not fair.
Oh, I hate that. Like, genuinely, that is like the bane of my existence is like to hear men, and I'm just completely unkind about it. I
know. That's why you better buckle up.
Because I'm like, dude, do this to me. I have men in my life. You know what I mean? Like, I have guys. I'm like, you're going to hold me to this standard. If I moan about the fact that it's not fair, just remind me that God, who made the universe, took on flesh, died on a cross, all completely unfair. The most unfair act in all of human history is the model of Jesus. And then you're supposed to love your wife that way. So when you moan, it's not fair. Jesus didn't say one time, this is not fair. Right. In fact, he's on the cross and says, forgive them.
Right. He's thinking of others.
What in the world? And the crazy part is, for most men in the church, they would rather spend $3,000 and fly across the planet instead of spending 30 minutes and walking across their living room. So it's like, we'll do great supernatural feats and tell everybody how we preached the gospel or did this thing for our family. Nobody cares how many hours you put in at work this week if you didn't put any hours into the relational connection of your home. If you're a provider, but not a protector, because I protect the home, I'm really tough, and I own a gun. Congratulations. That's like 5
years here in Florida.
Right, and in Reading where I live. It's like, great, you just accomplished like literally maybe 20% of manhood. Like you can do that tough thing. That's good.
Right.
I really do appreciate that. But if you can't protect a heart in a home, you have no real value there. You genuinely don't. Because you can't tell me that you'll protect the home, but you don't know how to protect a heart. A man needs to know how to protect a heart. And because yours was so beat the hell out of your whole life, you probably don't have much of a value for it. Nobody did it for you. Well, congratulations. You get to go first. And men always go first. Come on.
I've got two. It's kind of a and B of this.
Yeah.
Number one, how do you train up a child?
Mm-hmm.
But then number two, to someone who doesn't have children, or maybe they're empty nesters.
Yeah.
How do you kind of all encompass? Like, how do you do that? Because my answer to that is it's every man for himself.
Yeah, that makes sense. That actually does make sense. Here's what I'll tell you. I'll start with what I don't like, and then I'll work backwards. That's usually my way. Is what I don't like is systematic setting up for failure, because I have 5 steps to how to raise a good child.
Mm.
And now I added guilt and shame to my already deepening sense of failure.
Mm.
And I don't like that. I don't like the fact that we have thousands of parenting books, but very few people just helping people stay in the fight.
Mm.
And that's all that.
Like support system.
Right. And I just think that the best thing, when we talk about training up a child in the way that he goes, so he will not depart from it. Well, first, who said that?
Solomon.
Right. So we got Solomon, who is, his dad is David. So I think the thing that we have no practical history, biblically speaking, of David sitting Solomon down and just saying, write all these things down. So how did Solomon get it? Probably the same way we got scripture condensed, the years of Jesus' life condensed into 4 gospels that are very, very similar. It's because he spent his whole life hearing it and seeing it. So Solomon could write books on what he saw from his father because he watched his father do it.
Wow.
And we want the practical training to be, well, do these things. You need to get up and do devotions with your kids. You need to pray with them. You need to do whatever. It's like, no, let them see it and then develop a hunger for it. Because your kids, when they smell cookies, run to the cookies.
Right.
If they're not smelling cookies from your life, they're not going to run to your life. And if all you're doing is coming to if the only engagement you're having with your kids is discipline, you're doing it wrong. You know? And for us to train them up means I'm going to model something that they get hungry for.
That's good.
Right? And so and I suck at this most of the time. I wish somebody would have said this to me when my kids weren't 12, 13, 14, 15. I mean, that's when I first started hearing some of these things. Before then, it's just like, it's borderline just, half of it feels like borderline religious abuse.
Right.
And it works out for some kids. So in all honesty, I go, hey, whatever. That's why I go, throw out the books, or 2 options. Throw out all the books or read them all, and then just do whatever works for you.
Right. Right.
Whatever feels right to you in that space, trust your body because God gave you those kids for a very specific reason. And any idiot who tells you it has to be done this way because that's how they did it with their kids, do not ever listen to those people. Ever. Because they're coming with a sense of pride about something they know not anything of.
Right.
And let me tell you, I went up to a very famous preacher one time because I was just getting into this stuff. And I was like, I'm failing miserably with my kids. I'm like this is not working the way I thought. And I'm like, who gives their kids more attention? Who gives their kids, what am I doing wrong? You know, I'm pursuing their hearts.
Right,
you feel like it doesn't matter.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I know kids that don't have dads and they act better, you know?
Right.
And so I'm like,
Right.
what the heck is going on? And I went up to this really big, huge name. And I went up and I said, hey, I'm going to ask you a random question. We have a relationship. It wasn't totally whatever, out of the blue. I'm like, hey, I got a question. And I go, were you a good dad? And he started crying. And he goes, do you understand that in all my years of doing this, no one's ever asked me that question?
Wow.
And he said, and he said this, I will not answer it honestly because I only have my perspective.
Wow.
And he said, but my son is sitting right there. And he walked away from the Lord for 7 years. And this is his first event traveling with me. Go ask him.
Wow.
And I went up and talked to him for a little while. And then this guy actually gave me all of his son's phone numbers. And so I connected with all of them just to go, tell me what you did wrong. Tell me what you sucked at. What did he do that let you down? Because then at least I don't have to start from scratch.
Right. That's so good.
Right?
So good.
And all of it usually comes down to my mom and dad wanted to engage with me the way they wanted to be engaged with, not the way I wanted to be engaged with. And that's pretty much like child psychology kind of wrapped up in a very overarching, brushstroke, very big brushstroke. But it's like we're supposed to get down on their level. And then they build a value because they see our humility. And is that not what Jesus did for us?
Right.
He took on flesh.
Yeah.
He got on our level.
Right.
And we're like, no, child, come up here. Look how wise, amazing I am. You should honor me. And instead, you should probably get down in the dirt and make mud pies. And you should get down and play Legos. And you should. How many stories have we heard with guys?
One of the stories that I read the most at our last weekend was a story just like that.
Right, and there's so many where I just wanted to play with my dad.
Yeah.
I wanted to play with my mom.
Yeah.
I wanted to feel like I want to feel like they saw me.
Right.
And they wanted to get to know me,
Right.
not for me to get to know them. And I'm like, that to me is the biggest thing we can offer our children. And to me, that's what train up a child is.
Right.
Like, it's not this systematic, we've turned all of Christianity into systematic disciple structures. We've turned all of Christianity into systematic discipleship structures that look more like the education models of the world, not like the kingdom of heaven.
Right. We've let that, in my small view of it, we've let that become the whole thing instead of part of the thing.
Right, because I do want some education.
Right,
I need
absolutely.
to know stuff.
100%.
I've never read that verse before, so
Right.
I'm glad I heard T.D. Jakes preach on it. You know
Right.
what I mean?
What is that context? What is that? But we've let that, myself included, let that become the whole thing.
But that's the Protestant Reformation,
Right.
right? You've heard me say this
Yeah,
a ton. I'm
so
like,
true.
we removed the Eucharist and put in a pulpit.
Yep.
So instead of mystery and suffering being the centerpiece of our gathering,
Right.
it is now man's opinion.
Right.
And none of, just so we're clear, no preacher is right. Right. Zero of them.
I'll be the first in the line of
Right. And it's like, but it's so hard because we're like, well, I heard so and so say it. I'm like, I don't care. Yeah, but they're really big and famous and usually right. They are no one is getting to heaven looking at Jesus and going, got that figured out. Like, we're all going to look at him and be dumbfounded at how stupid and ridiculous and small our theology was.
Right.
It was so tiny and insignificant to who he is. The greatness, the majesty. Like, that's the part that messes my heart up the most. Because I'm like, we've made him so small. And it's no wonder we're not changing the world. Well, no, he's big. Look at the Psalms. I'm not talking about your language. I'm talking about your life. We've made him so tiny. He's so much more beautiful than we've ever given credit for. Like, why do we not spend tons of services just dumbfounded by how big he is? Instead, we got to then steward the moment somehow. And we look like some clown juggling in the middle of a circus.
Right.
And wonder why the world is like, if he's that big, shut up.
Right. Yeah.
If he's that big, you shouldn't have to tell me all the time how big he is.
Right. If he's that big, you should see it in the home.
You should see it on the lives of the
Yeah.
family. No, what, dude? Just total whatever, which, cut out later because I'll get crucified for it. Is I'm like, that's why we're so pissed at people trying to teach our young children about sex. Why? Why are we so pissed about that? Because really what we're facing is deep shame and guilt, and we didn't teach our kids about sex. They're doing what we were supposed to be doing, and we're pissed at them for doing it. Because their way is dysfunctional. The answer isn't yell at the people who are trying to do it. I agree it's dysfunctional. I agree they shouldn't.
Right.
I agree it shouldn't be mandated from the government, blah, blah, blah. Great. But the answer isn't yelling at them.
Right.
We're not providing anything
good.
better.
So good.
What are we providing that's better than governmental overreach in healthcare and sex education?
Right.
Well, we're not offering anything.
Right. Yeah.
We're just trying to run good services.
It almost seems like, and you're right, I don't know how much this will cut out because people would get upset. It almost seems like we don't know how to teach about it at home, so we almost rather online or school
Right.
peers to teach about it.
Dude, and I think it's way deeper. We have so much shame and
Right,
guilt about
right.
how we've acted sexually and our lack.
Oh, so you're saying almost like we weren't taught,
There you go.
so it turned into a mistake after mistake after mistake.
Boom.
I see what you're saying.
Now,
Yeah, that's
how
so
am I
good.
supposed to teach on that?
Right.
Because again, it goes back to the first part of our conversation.
That's so good.
I'm not going to teach you something that I don't feel I'm arrived in.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, congratulations. You'll never teach anything.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so good.
And it's like, instead of just recognizing, like, we're not, the world is responding. The world itself, the world, it says it groans.
Mm-hmm.
This is the groanings.
Right.
We just didn't know it would sound like this.
Right.
But this is what it sounds like.
Right.
The world doing what we were supposed to be doing
Yeah.
in a way that is harmful and destructive.
Right.
That We're supposed to be doing that.
Why? And while the church is trying to have good services.
That is what is ludicrous to me. Ludicrous.
I saw something the other day. My brother-in-law sent this to me, and he hit it on the head. And I think it was Andy Stanley just said this recently or something. But I was like, that's the best language I've heard from that. Christians are screaming, "Save America," but they don't want Americans saved.
Dude,
They don't and I've been guilty of that.
right?
Save America, save America. Oh, wait. People that I disagree with actually get saved, and I have to do family with them, and I have to do family at home, and it's not just going to be bigger services. And I told somebody this past Sunday on Easter.
Yeah.
Countdown's on, and he said, "You excited for?" I said, "I love that we do church, but this is just advertising for me."
Yeah.
Because if our church does not do community outside of this,
That's right.
then we're gonna. And there's nothing against others, but
Right.
we have to. If you're gonna champion every season, you have to do this at home.
Dude, and what's crazy is what you just said is insanely profound, and it has to be repeated, which is this thing we do on Sundays actually isn't church. It is but it is a great,
It's a great tool, right?
See, most people go, "Yeah, that's right, burn it down." I'm like,
Right.
whoa.
We have a few people around down center.
Right. And it's like, dude. No, you went too far.
Right.
See, that middle ground is going, no, it's not everything. Sunday is not everything. But we all would not be here if it didn't exist.
So true.
Because we need a front door into family.
Right.
Church is supposed to be the front door into family.
So good. We wouldn't have this relationship without church.
And that's what makes it awesome. I love the gatherings. I actually love the stadiums. I actually love the arenas. I love that, but we give it too much honor. We can't give it overdue honor, because then it becomes idolatry.
Right.
And really, if we're just completely cutting through the crap, the reason it happens is money.
Right.
And perceived influence.
Right.
So in your little culture, you have a little influence. So then you start peddling that thing out, and you better and the more money you make for doing bare minimum.
Right. And it's a thing too where and this is something we even are battling now. Well, if you're not having it in person, you're not a real church. No, we're still every bit of still a family. We're still doing stuff, but that's just going to be a tool in the toolbox.
That's exactly right, because I think it's just a front door.
Right.
Like, if you're not walking into a family, then what are you doing?
So
Why are we gathering?
So good.
And if that's not about the connection points that can be made in that space, but there's no demand for it. Like, it says so everyone's like, yeah, we need more character. We need, whatever, endurance, character, whatever. The whole thing begins biblically with suffering. And I'm not talking about the big suffering. We can have the big word suffering.
Right.
I'm talking about just the tension of, I'm not going to meet every need in your church.
Right.
Actually, I'm not going to meet your needs. But Jake, no.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. God, you just don't do care well. Well, I'm like, no, I actually do care really well. I'm just not going to hold your hand, because then I become an enabler instead of an empowerer. And I don't want to be an enabler. I want to be an empowerer. And if I'm going to empower you, I'm going to put you through tension, and you're going to be left in the desert a while by yourself, because you'll build muscles that you're going to need to walk in provision that God's going to bring.
Absolutely. When you come out, it's not I'm learning when you come out of that,
Right.
as you go through what I'm just learning in my life, you haven't hit the finish line, but you're ready for next.
Right, it's just seasons.
Right, you're ready
It's
for next.
winter, spring, summer, fall.
Right.
And it's okay. But you have to learn that tension, because I'm not going to do it for you.
Right.
And most of the churches has 30 million things going on, and you're like, that's unsustainable.
Right.
And now and on top of these 30,000 things we have going on, you need to do this in your home. Right.
Right.
I don't really have time for that, number one. And number two, feels like we're doing a lot of that connection stuff here, so it's just easier if you do it for me.
Exactly. And then you wonder why at home you don't have God, and people are like, how the heck do you leave your home?
Right.
How do you have God in your home? I'm 100% guilty of this. It wasn't until I met Felicia, who was a part of a church who pushed stuff at home.
Right.
I never taken communion at my table.
So wild.
Never.
Right.
But it's like, I thought I did this on the last Sunday of every month.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait a minute. Since we're on the suffering thing, we'll kind of wrap up here. This is just so rich on this. On suffering, because we're going to be talking a lot over the next month about doubting.
Yeah.
Because with doubt, for me, and I feel like I don't want to do a big blanket statement, when we started to doubt, I was so much in the Pentecostal word of faith stuff as a kid. It was almost shameful. If you doubted. You've walked through doubt in your life. With family, stuff like that. When you're doubting, what do you practically do to keep that faith up? Like if someone's like, man, I'm trying to be a Christian. This stuff is hard. I thought life was supposed to be perfect afterwards, and there is that tension, so much of the suffering. What do you do when you start hitting those walls of like, man, I just doubt in general?
You have to engage it. The number one, and I mean, I've said this since the beginning of our entire conversation, most of the stuff we're bringing up, we just end up figuring out how to numb ourselves out of it, get straight to comfort as quick as possible, which is why we love prayer lines and stuff like that, which I'm not anti, but usually they're just a way of trying to get through as quick as possible.
Microwave miracle. And that sounds derogative.
But it's not, but it's real. It's like, I just need, and then I got to claim it, because I don't, it's okay, you're still in pain, and we're going to claim it, whatever. It is what it is. For me, I'm going, the way to actually, I sound like a broken record, and I get that. I'm like, if we don't engage with our doubt and actually go, why is it there? Okay, I'm going to see you, and I'm going to admit. Like, I'm going to be really honest, and I'm going to share it with somebody. I'm going to share it with my wife. I'm going to share it with, a friend. I'm going to sit and go, I really just don't think God's going to show up for this. I don't think that this is going to happen. And then going, okay, I can sit in that. And I just sit in that space. And it's like, well, what good is that? Well, I'm going to weep over that. Doubt comes from somewhere. Where did that doubt? Doubt doesn't just manifest like, and now I have doubt. It's like, no, doubt is connected to stories in your life.
Oh, that's good.
So doubt is connected to impressions or experiences in your life that are now showing up in a different context. And because the context feels so far apart, you're not following the thread to connect the dots to deep disappointment you've had in your life. Most doubt has its root system in disappointment. And we have to find where that disappointment is.
That's so good.
And if we can get back to that disappointment, where Chris Valentin says it all the time. He's like, disappointment is just a missed appointment. So where was that missed appointment that you're now, 20 years later, 30 years later, putting on this moment that you're in? And it most of the time doesn't even have to do with God. It has to do with mom or dad or some storyline, friendships, and it's like, this hurt. And now I'm here again. And the reason we want to get rid of it is because I don't want to look at this. I don't want to look at the fact that I was hurt when I was 12. I got delivered from that. It's like, no, you don't get delivered from yourself. God doesn't save you from your story, He saves you from your sin. He saves you from the repercussion of this trauma and this experience.
So good.
But He doesn't save you from this. This actually happened in your life. So let's go backwards and look at it and grieve it and mourn it and then find joy and shalom. Deep shalom is agreement, right? So that's what shalom is. You want peace in your life? Start making agreement with your life. And stop, and it's hard because like you said, in Word of Faith, charismatic backgrounds, I don't want to claim that. I hear that all the time. I don't want to say that out loud. What's going to happen? Like genuine. I literally have never seen someone admit a truth that actually happened.
And I think they've taken that, something that was good, and because we were talking about mindsets earlier before we started recording. They're trying to stop, hey, don't have that, we were talking about poverty mindset. Don't have this mindset. And it took, well, as long as I don't say it, then I won't be. No, you can still have that mindset.
That's exactly right. You're living in the entire thing.
Exactly. They've taken, and I'm sure we'll look back in 20 years and be like, oh, we had this so wrong with the 2020s church, but I'm not trying to say like we've got it all figured out, but they've taken that and made it a big thing where you can't admit that happened. Or I'm feeling this right now.
And saying it out loud. So, okay, let's just play this out. You have a massive doubt in your life. Completely just doubting whatever it is. Okay? Big, small, provision, this thing, this transition, marriage, your kids, whatever it is. Could be anything. Let's play out. You don't say anything. Did your doubt go away? No.
Right. No, not at all.
It's still there.
Right.
All we do, now we're just forced to carry it isolated.
Now you're dragging that weight.
So, well, and like we've talked about, in terms of the long bag we drag behind us,
Yeah.
what we're actually doing on a psychological level, if we want to get like really technical, you're severing yourself.
Yeah.
You're actually causing fractures in your psychological structures that are actually going to have to be repaid in the future.
Yeah.
You're literally severing the portion of you, fracturing the portion of you that sees your life accurately, and you're using religion to take that part and fracture it from a part of your actual being.
And you become a piece of you.
That's exactly right.
Dragging the weight of. I want to have you record one for our church one time, and that just be our weekly focus of, because the long bag is helping me.
Right.
So much realize things of this is why this weight is heavy, and I love that about doubt.
Right, and with doubt, if you open that bag 10 years from now, that doubt's still there.
Right.
And now it's just pissed.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, well, no wonder you get angry when it's brought up.
Right.
So if
or
you
become angry at God.
Angry at God, angry at your spouse,
Yeah.
angry at your kids, it's everyone else's fault.
Yeah.
And the truth is, if you would have just said it out loud and admitted it with humility and tenderness, that this is where I'm at, then it can be healed.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why did Jesus, this is a great example of it in Scripture. Jesus says, what's wrong with you? It's like, well, it's pretty clear.
Right. Or what do you want me to do with
exactly. What are you? Right.
I'm blind or whatever.
I want you to heal me. Well, because there's this reality of going, we're looking at it only in the positive because we only want to deal in the comfort and the care portion. Instead of going, actually, we're going to get deeper comfort and deeper care if we tell people where we are currently. I'm experiencing doubt. Wow, that must be really hard for you.
Right.
Tell me more about it. How deep does it go?
Right.
Well, now you're excavating story.
Right.
Wow, when was the last time you felt this? Are there other areas in your life? Now what are you doing? You're emptying the long bag, one little story at a time, telling all of the places you haven't been able to communicate this.
And one of the things I've learned through our third Man Talks, season or whatever we're calling it, what I've learned in that, because I've always thought, well, if I start to bring this stuff out, then what? Well, then you realize, okay, this is where I need God, is wholeness that He brings. This is where I need that comfort that the Holy Spirit can only bring. This is where it's not just bringing it all out, because that was a fear. I used to be afraid. And I'm going to do one more question after this because it made me think about when people would start to get prophetic. Yeah. I would be afraid. What if you know something about me that because that's what I was thought, of some type of group. I was so afraid to be a part of anything because if I said something that I was, well, then what do you do with that? Well, then you have people around you who truly, you're going to find out who loves you or not.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think more people love you than we think. Right, and not that you need to.
No, you're 100%.
I would have never thought I have 20 guys from all over literally the world, that can love me, check on me. I would have never thought that ever. If I said, "Hey, this is what I'm really feeling," and then those are the things I start to bring before God. Not even in a super religious thing. Like a lot of times you'll ask us how we process it, what we talked about, and I'm like, man, I'm having these talks with God. Like I didn't realize I was mad about this. Or I'm hurting still from this. Or I'm completely not even in faith with you, or whatever it might be. And I think that kind of happens when you start to bring that out.
And pain is simply a way of your body or your mind telling you where you still need healing.
Yeah.
So pain, if you look at pain that way, it's not a negative. Mm-hmm. If I ignore it, the pain gets worse. Right. So if I have pain in my knee, I want to pay attention to it.
You just keep going, it's going to make it worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Exactly right. But I want to look at it, honor my knee as part of my created body before God that's made in His image. And I honor that pain, and it gives me now a pathway to healing because I'm paying attention to it.
That's so good.
That's
so good. Last question. I know I said last question.
You're Chris.
Last question for real. So we're dealing with doubt, and then on the other side, because I think a lot of people doubt in their home more than they doubt anywhere.
Yeah,
the kitchen,
for sure.
Those kind of places. Maybe it's laying in bed, sitting on it, whatever it might be. So I want to just kind of talk about that. But at the same time, something I'm seeing in me, and I want it to be in our church family, I'm hearing from God more than ever washing dishes at the house.
Yeah.
It's not really in my prayer time. It's not in my devotional time.
Yeah.
I'm hearing from God in those moments. What is a simple way, because then we're going to go get something to eat. What is a simple way that you can tell someone that they've maybe never heard God's voice, which I don't believe that's true. I think everybody's heard it. They just don't know what it is.
Absolutely.
How would you tell people to hear from God?
I would say twofold. Number one, when you hear something come into your body that's not necessarily your typical way of thinking, I would say follow it. Just for fun.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and I will tell you my entire prophetic journey, it began in a Baptist church that doesn't believe in the gifts. And I wouldn't have called it prophecy then. I would get an impression of a person that I was supposed to call. I'd be like, I wonder how they're doing.
Oh,
You know, like even today, I was like,
Right,
dude, you're on my heart.
Yeah.
And this guy was on my heart texting. Dude, it is and every time,
Yeah.
it's crazy you love you
Right.
of all days. You know what I mean? Oh my God.
It's not great. That's the Holy Spirit's speaking.
Right, exactly. But we don't learn that until we try things,
Mhm.
right? And those are simple ways of doing it, you know? Then you kind of step out a little further and do it in public places with random people, you know?
Right.
Now I'm hanging out last night and talking with 10 guys from all over the world that, like, literally last night down in Orlando, and they're like from all over the country, been getting together every year for 10 years. And
That's cool.
we end up in this huge conversation about family and marriage and whatever. And then just giving that, like, oh, absolutely, I could just prophesy over you guys.
Right,
It's
right.
I've developed a way of hearing.
Right.
So I can bring it into any space I need to because I've honored that for so long in my body.
Yeah.
And so when you honor those things in your body, it becomes second nature to you. But really, we need more practice at being able to do that portion.
I think isn't it like they always say faith is a muscle, has to grow.
Yeah.
Okay. I would feel, not that I disagree with that. I feel like prophetic hearing from God is more like that than faith. If that, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I feel like hearing from God is that muscle you're kind of building of. And I might be wrong at that. I've seen it in my life. That's what I feel like.
And I think like what's so interesting is like when it comes to really, if we're talking about the opposite of doubt and actually learning to walk in real faith, it has a lot to do with embracing mystery and tension. So we have to there's a degree to which you're going to have to admit your stupidity. You know what I mean?
Right.
In a real tangible way. By operating in real tenderness, real humility, and embracing that mystery part of, I really don't know how this whole thing functions, but I'm gonna really try to bring it into my house first.
Right. Right.
And being able to, any gifts that you have, whatever your gifts are, if your family isn't getting the first portion of that, it actually won't develop in a healthy way outside of your home. So that's from construction workers to musicians. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even preaching, it's like if your main gift is teaching, but you're not bringing teaching into your home in a practical way to your kids, it's not going to necessarily develop the muscles in the right way. It's like working out poorly, from that example. It's like you work out poorly, you're actually going to injure yourself, if not injure somebody else, if you're not working it out properly.
Right.
And I think in the home, there's just this need, if we're going to walk in really deep faith, the risky kind of faith, and we're going to see it multiplied in our home, we have to just start embracing mystery and walk down that road a little bit more and see where it leads.
Right. I appreciate it. Let me, what would you say, if anything, if not, we can be done. This was great, and I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
So just our team, who's not that there's no church doing this ever, because that's such a broad statement, but who's saying, hey, listen, we're focusing on daily journeying to champion everything as a church, and to do a different model. That Sunday morning is just a tool. I love how you put it. It's just a doorway to what we're doing, but we're really trying to champion this. Is there anything you would say to us as a team or any of that kind of stuff?
I would say if you can do anything else, do it. Which sounds demeaning.
No, right, yeah.
But I'm because the only way you survive doing something like this is you feel deep at a soul level compelled that you have to. And if you don't feel like you have to, like if you don't take that breath, you'll die, then get out now. Like to the whole team. Like I'm being completely serious. Because if not, you're going to hurt everyone around you.
Right.
Because you're making promises that you're actually not going to be able to commit to. Like, and I've seen that a lot because I need approval. I need to perform well. I need Trevor to like me, you know? And there is a lot of that because there is an honoring of who you are and the faith steps that you and your family have taken. So there's like, oh, I want to please him. I want to, you know, we got dad issues and all other sorts of stuff that can be brought in there. But I'm genuinely saying to the team, if you can do anything else, do it. Like walk away now.
Yeah.
If you can't, I can't not. Like soul level, I can't not be a part of this and helping it thrive. Then the next piece for me would be like, we're talking about eternity. You don't have to do this in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's more of a word for me.
Well, I think it's for everyone. It's like there's this, we have to kind of accomplish our goals in 10 weeks or 10 months or, oh crap, it's been 3 years and we're behind now. Right. And it's like, behind eternity? Like,
right. Yeah. When you look at it like that, it's like,
wow, are we thinking about 1 billion years? Or are we thinking about what feels good and looks good for you? And I think like if everyone can just slow down, you'll have a lot more fun, which I think is what I would say is the last thing, is if you have lost your joy in doing it, then you're doing it too fast. Because you have to have joy.
So good.
It's like and I don't mean the sort of silly charismatic joy.
Right. No,
love that, go laugh in the spirit, all that.
You're talking about deep stuff.
I'm talking about like, I'm with my friends.
Right.
Like when I planted a church when I was 20, like when we did that when 19 or 20, it was fun because it was being with my friends. Like if you're not doing this with your friends and you're just trying to build something and everyone on the team is like build, there is a mindset for that. There's some guys I know that do that and they do that really well.
Right.
But it also brings them deep, satisfying, lasting joy. You know what I mean? Because that's how they're wired.
Right.
And so I'm like, that's cool. But also like, you're not going to be a better Christian because your church was built faster. Like you don't get more points on the scoreboard because you got it done in 10 weeks instead of 10 years.
Right, that's good.
But you kind of lost your family and your soul in the midst of it. So way to go on you. Congratulations. But lots of people come now.
Right.
So it's like, and you have like 6 campuses. Whee!
Right.
It's like, no, those are the things I would say. If you don't feel compelled and convicted at a core level that you're supposed to lead, then just be a part. So don't lead, just come and be a part.
Yeah.
Second, like time, like this doesn't happen yet. Give yourself 4 years. Why not? I mean, can you think about like, what if your goal was when I'm 60, I want to have a thriving community? Well, then the pressure's way off.
Yeah, no kidding.
You know, and it's just, you're going to be able to sustain family and relationships a lot deeper. So to me, that feels healthier. And then the third being in that, do I still have joy? Do I like actually doing this with my friends and my family? Or does my family now hate the church?
Right.
I think that's what we end up seeing is a lot of kids walking away from the faith whose parents did great things for God and are heroes. But all their kids had to go through massive amounts of counseling and are still working through the trauma from their parents being great leaders in the church.
Right.
You know? So as a community of leaders, I would just say those things are really, really important. They're foundational, you know, to actually sustaining long term.
I love that.